All right.
There it is. Got it. Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order, and then we'll dial John in when he calls in, and we'll go from there. So in attendance, I see J. Aerosmith DeCoo, David Mills, Chris McPherson, Helen Muth, Amanda St. John's, who is the library director, and Patrick Knight, who is the communications director for the city. So now we've said that, we got that all taken care of. We can go on to the very first thing on our agenda, which is, it says select secretary. So with John not here, I'll just kind of briefly summarize that that John has some, I think she must be calling him right now. John is still interested in being the secretary, but he's shown some reservations about doing it in the online, over the online version of the meetings. So if it's okay with the board, I was thinking about just, I would just write the minutes while we go through the meetings, and until he's ready to reassume that role. So unless somebody else has a better idea or a different idea, I think that's. Oh, we're trying to get John in here, and maybe we should wait until he jumps on to if we can figure that out. But that's kind of the skinny on it.
Jay, I think the only technicality there is John. There needs to be a secretary, but John can delegate the roles.
There he is.
To an individual.
Yeah. We've got you, John. Okay. But you're still muted.
John, if you move your mouse over the bottom of the screen, you'll see 3 icons. One is of a microphone, and if you press that, it'll unmute you.
That one. There we go. Yes?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Great. So, John, we were just
all right,
talking,
everybody.
Great. We were just talking about the secretary, and I offered to take the minutes while we're doing it like this, and Dave said that he thinks that the technicality of it might be that you have to actually delegate that to someone else. So I don't know how we want to deal with this as a group. It's a lot easier if we have recordings, because then
I would like to step in here, because I think I've been in meetings that this has been the situation. And often whenever a secretary cannot be present, they simply ask someone to take the minutes. So I think if Dave needs a second for that support, for the idea of John just asking someone to cover for him. And if, say, for instance, Jay, you can't be there, he could still ask someone else. I mean, it isn't like it's a permanent, or it would have to be a permanent one person.
Right. Yeah, I think that probably makes the most sense. For this meeting, I'm willing to do that. Like, I've got the agenda and the director's report already set up to be, to take notes. So unless somebody else is really ripping to take the meeting minutes, I would be willing to do that.
Thanks, Jay.
All right. So we'll just move.
Thank you.
No worries. And I'm going to write that John was at the meeting too, so we're good. Introduction of visitors. I think it's funny that that's still on our agenda, because we would have visitors if they had something to talk to us about, but we don't have any visitors at our meeting. And then we have our consent agenda. So the consent agenda has typical 3 things that we're used to seeing on it. The agenda for this meeting, the minutes from the previous meeting, which we put together from a couple of different resources, so it should be pretty accurate. And then the bills submitted on the 6th of May. So
I would like to move the current agenda for today's meeting off the consent agenda so it can be modified in a few minutes, please.
okay. Good to know. So then we have 2 items for the consent agenda. Then we've got the meeting or the minutes from the previous meeting and the bills. Unless somebody would like to pull something else for discussion, we can. I would entertain a motion to approve that.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda with the 2 items on it, please.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion by McPherson, second by Cooks. And so the way we have to do these, the votes on these is that we have to do it roll call style. So when I call your name, and tell me what your vote is. So I'll start at the top of my list and go down. So Dave Mills, what's your vote?
Aye.
Helen, what's your vote?
Aye.
John, your vote?
Aye.
Chris, your vote?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. So that will carry unanimously. All right. So you have to bear with me a little bit. I like to make the notes right as we do it so I don't mess up. So there might be like a couple of seconds of blank time as I type. Okay, so let's talk about the agenda for this meeting. So do you have something to add, Chris, or what's your conversation on that?
The personnel committee has a very brief report.
Okay. I'll just write that down and say request to update personnel committee update. That should work. All right, so I'll change that in the agenda right here, and then we'll need a motion to approve that. For anybody who's interested in making a motion for that, go ahead.
I can make a motion for it, but I understood Chris had made a motion. But I can make a motion that the personnel committee make a report since I'm on that committee.
Well, what we're doing is we're approving the agenda for the meeting. So when she pulled it from the roll call or from the consent agenda, then that meant that we just needed to update the agenda with whatever she wanted, and then we need to approve the
Agenda again?
Approve the agenda.
Okay,
Yeah.
I move that we approve the agenda with the addition of a report from the personnel committee.
Okay, so that's a motion to approve from Muth. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second Books, and then we'll do the same thing that we did before with the roll call vote. So Dave, your vote?
Aye.
And Helen, your vote?
Aye.
John, your vote?
Aye.
Chris, your vote?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. So the agenda is approved. Okay, cool. So then we will we'll continue to move along, and when we get down to that personnel committee spot in the agenda, then you can just give that. All right, so Library Friends Liaison Report. Chris, you got anything for us?
Nope, nobody's met.
Okay, that's fair. So then we'll go on to the ALS Board Report. Helen, you got anything for us?
I have a few items. It could be very long, but the ALS sent me out their what what is called the weekly reader, and it came at 3:15. And I've been looking for an update from them because I know that Jim Weecum has been, after the meeting of what they call the executive committee, which meets every other month. The the board that I'm on, the whole board, doesn't meet again until June. But the point I want to make is that they were anticipating what would be coming down from the state in regard to the stay in place, and evidently from what they've been able to do over just the couple of days they've been working on it, they've left everything as is, which means the mail-a-book is in full operation, the online resources are all operational, and the office you can get information through both telephone and emails and during their regular hours. But that has not been anything that's different previously. I know that one thing they were trying to work on was the bookmobile, but the report that I received today, it is still not running, and the interlibrary loan is not being distributed, and the on-site trainings, you can call and see if there's something available there that you would be interested in, but it is still an iffy thing. So that might be the first thing, is they can bring some people on site. They have a lovely big conference room that people could do social distancing, I'm sure. And all of the legacy programs are postponed, but that word is postponed. And I do have a couple of things, that's kind of long, but a couple of things that I think is pretty interesting, in that we know that we're having this one book, One Minnesota, but I was not aware that the ebooks, now I'm going to read this so that I make it clear to me as I make it clear to you, hopefully. eBooks Minnesota is an online ebook collection for all Minnesotans. The collection covers a wide variety of subjects for readers of all ages and features contents from our state's independent publishers, including some of our best literature and nonfiction. eBooks Minnesota is a joint project of Minitex and the Minnesota Department of Education, the State Library Services, and the collection has been made possible in part by funding from the Minnesota Department of Education through a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Now, I'm not sure everyone understood, or maybe you are very well familiar with this, but I have been aware that the library is supported as the museums are supported, but I'm not sure where I got the information. And I think this was a very good update on that. And then we do have, with the One Minnesota, we have the Library Friends of the, well, it's called the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. But the thing I want to pull out of this is that the Friends have been designated by the Library of Congress, the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. They have been designated by the Library of Congress to be the Minnesota Center for the Book, which is really great because the library, they have this kind of designation for all 50 states. And the Friends in St. Paul got that in 2012, which is some considerable time after it was first put in place in 1977. And then there's a note on the back here. The centers, and this is fun, the centers are designated to celebrate each state's literary heritage, strengthen their communities, and foster civic engagement. So I thought that put it right back to us. And I'm not sure, probably Amanda's going to speak to this, but the Minnesota Department of Education has put out a directive. It's not a directive, but because right in here it says the decisions regarding library offerings will be made at the local level within set parameters. But unless I read 3 paragraphs to you, I think that Amanda probably will cover that, because with opening of the window service, she's had to fit everything in to these guidelines. And she'll probably speak to that. And that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update. It's always fun to hear what ALS is up to. It always seems like they've got a lot of stuff going on. So it's good to.
The thing about it is, it really does affect us.
Mhm.
We've got this stair step that we're running up and down, and they have parameters, but they don't have control completely, and we can only do things at the local level in regards. And so ALS is just a stair step to the state and where the funds come from, and of course we contribute ourselves to the funds. It's as Dave well knows, that the money that comes from the county really helps everyone in our Cook County, even city residents. But and we also know that by being a part of this consortium, that we are not only helping ourselves, we are helping other people as they are a party to it and helping us. So it is a not just a one-way street, that it has a wonderful interaction and combination support, in my view. No, it is not in my view. It is true.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. Does anybody have any questions for Helen about the ALS report? Okay, move on to the director's report. So Amanda had the director's report written out for all of us. A couple of relatively important things popped in there, so I'll turn that over to Amanda to take that one.
Okay. At the last meeting, the board made a motion to reinvest money to St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation, and I'm just closing our communication loop here that we can't do that. The fund for St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation is a designated fund, and a nonprofit cannot make a donation back to it. So it works differently than the Duluth one, where we take the check and deposit it. It's in the 215 in a line for the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation. So we can come back and revisit that at another time.
So here's a question that I should have looked up before. Because there was a motion that we couldn't do, I'm assuming that motion just kind of gets nixed. I don't think that we need to rescind it or anything like that. So I have a feeling we don't need to do anything. I'm just going to write down action unnecessary for that, because there's a line in the agenda that says motion to reinvest the check from St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation. And because it's already where it belongs, which is the 215, then I'm just going to write action unnecessary, check is in the 215 fund. Does that work for everybody? It seems like that's the place where it should be. So
I think we don't have any other place to put it. I think that's just the default.
I think you're right. Since we don't want to put it back in the Duluth Superior Foundation, then I think that's probably the place to put it. So
I thought that the reason, the exclusive reason why we didn't want to put it back into the Duluth Superior Fund was because the Minnesota St. Paul one is a little better managed, a better rate of return. But I thought otherwise, previously it was going into the Duluth Superior. So I don't know that, is it the case that we don't want to do that, or is it just the case that we thought the Minnesota St. Paul, right, Minnesota.
St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul, Minnesota, ampersand, was better. And I'm really confused because I thought we had done that in the past once, or maybe that just isn't the case.
I think that might have been with the Duluth Superior Fund, David,
Yeah.
where we rolled the money back into it. My understanding of the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation, and Amanda, please correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding, is that the type of account that we have doesn't allow for that type of reinvestment of that money. That's money that's supposed to be like taken off and used instead of reinvested into the capital. So
Mariah, I think it's Mariah's the gift planner, and she said that our fund type designated fund is only able to accept donations from individuals, not from nonprofit entities. If we wanted to create something that would accept money from the nonprofit, we would have to open a different fund account.
Is
that a requirement of the foundation, or is that a requirement of the city in terms of our finances? I don't know this. This is all new to me. So this person that you're speaking of, is she with the Minneapolis Foundation, or is she with the city? Oh, she's with the Minneapolis.
She's with the foundation.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Here's the next follow-up question, and I wonder if this is maybe we'll get to the crux of what the situation is here. I remember a couple of years ago when we started putting money in the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation, we had to make a decision on whether that money would be reinvested into the foundation or that we would get a check. Is that, I mean, maybe that was still the Duluth Superior Foundation. I keep getting them mixed up in my head. But Amanda, it might not be a bad idea to just check with that gift planner there and see if there's some way that we can change our preferences so that they don't write us a check. Because if the money is already in the account, then they shouldn't have to write us a check. And then it can just continue accruing inside the account. They're not actually receiving a donation from us,
From ourselves to ourselves,
because the money's already in the account. It never was taken out.
Okay, I can do that.
Does that address some of the concerns and thoughts?
Yep.
Now, is that, I need to get it. That is just for the Minnesota, St. Paul. That particular, or St. Paul, Minnesota, whichever it is, the foundation in Minneapolis rather than the one in Duluth.
Correct.
That you want to roll their income back into them.
I think that's what we're getting at.
That's a question. Pardon me?
Yep, I think that's what we're getting at, Helen.
Okay, but then
it's not so much that it rolls back, Helen. I think it's that it never comes out. It just keeps building on itself.
And so it's
so
not.
If you took it out and we rolled it back in, that's different.
It's not cyclic in this way that it is now. It would be you don't want it to roll back in forever, or you have no reason to have it.
Right.
So it is a yearly decision, or what?
I think that's what Amanda needs to find out for us.
I agree.
Talking to this person.
That's the missing piece of info right there. Yep.
Okay.
Cool. So sorry, I kind of hijacked your director's report, so you can keep going.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up about the pickup window and our idea of a recovery plan. The pickup window went really well. We had 46 people the first day, and things are that was pretty good. Things are tapering off now, and what other ALS libraries are doing. So let's just say that the world is moving so quickly these days, and the governor continues to refresh where we are in our statewide plan for managing and mitigating COVID-19. And so May 18 was a big change that allows businesses to open if they can do that at 50% capacity. And then later on June 1st or somewhere in June, at the first week of June, then there will be another relaxing of the dials, and bars and salons and things like that will be able to open up. So what I've seen happening as a trend throughout Arrowhead is that almost all the libraries are now offering curbside, and 18 of us are offering, we're restarting the delivery system for interlibrary loans. So I would like to do that next, is open our library back up to the courier so that we can exchange books with each other again. And again, that part of that next phase for us will allow staff, while we're still closed to the public, to continue to get used to materials handling. And it will also offer another layer of service directly to the public. There's a lot of conversation in libraries about what to do next, and I am interested in the board sharing a little bit about what your priorities are for reopening, because we have the governor who's moving forward with opening buildings, and we also have the library can be one of what he's calling an unpredictable space. So if you walk into a restaurant, you have a pretty good sense that a person may wait at the hostess stand and go sit down at a table, and you can direct where everyone's going to go. The library's a little less predictable. So if, let's just say if, since we meet once a month, if, for example, the city chose to open public-facing offices again, I would just like to make sure that we have I would not like to jump and run with that. So I'm looking at offering interlibrary loan services and using that pickup window for a little while longer before we start looking at what it looks like to open the doors. Does that feel like a good fit?
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I'm certainly, yes, if you have the opportunity, you should be able to.
Okay.
May I ask the question of where the courier is, it's simply, the courier is going to deliver something to the building. It will come into the library, go through whatever process you plan, and then it would be shelved and waiting for whoever is wanting to pick up their interlibrary loan material.
Mm-hmm. We'd get some of our books back, and we'd get a bunch of books that people have on hold from other libraries. And the first thing that would happen is they'd go through the same quarantine process that we're doing for all of our returns.
Okay, that's what I like hearing that. Yes, thank you.
Good, great. So that is my report.
Okay, great. Thank you, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the director's report? It seemed that it's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Cool. All right, so then we'll move down. So the motion to reinvest the check from the SBA St. Paul Minnesota Foundation, we handled that. And then recovery plan, unless you have something else to add about that, Amanda, I think you covered that in your director's report as well.
I was, because I was so confused about the whole foundation thing, I was just going through previous monthly meeting packets, and in February of 2019, if you go in the communications folder, there's a 2018 annual statement from St. Paul and Minnesota Fund, and they on page 2, it says grants paid, and in parentheses returned. And it says City of Grand Marais. So I don't know what that means, but maybe we're backpedaling here and we just need to do a little more digging. So sorry to interrupt. But
no, David, I think you're right, Dave. I think that we, for some reason, had asked to get that money sent to us as a check, so we had the flexibility to choose what we wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
But I think that was also on the understanding that we could reinvest it if we wanted to. So I think that we'll have Amanda gather some of that information and bring it back to the next meeting, and we should have a much better idea about what's where we stand with that.
Yep.
No worries.
Sorry to interrupt there.
Finance committee has no report, but needs to set a time to meet. Policy committee does not have a report. And the personnel committee does have a report. So that's
a very brief report.
Very brief. Go ahead, Chris.
There are 14 applicants for the position. And some of us, I don't know if we've all done it by now, Amanda, but have read through the applications, and we will be moving to next steps in the next couple of weeks. Is that everything else you can think of that you might want to say? Yeah, okay. It's a very brief report, but we're moving, we're working.
That's fabulous. 14 applicants is a lot of options, so that's really great.
Mm-hmm. There were some interesting applications.
Oh, there always are. All right. So for communications, we have 2 of them in the folder. Amanda wrote up a memo regarding the overdrive system and e-audiobooks. Your allocation back to ALS will really help in a time of such digital content demand was the thank you that we got for that. So Amanda, unless you have some other importance from that memo, I think we'll just kind of move on with that then too.
The memo answers David's questions about how the selectors make their decisions. So it's available if you'd like to read through.
Yeah,
Cool.
the only question I had was the difference between the categories. What was it? What was the wording? I'm sorry, I have to get back to our my thing is stalling on me. I think it was just like audiobooks. Does that mean the CDs, or is the same thing as Overdrive?
Overdrive is a collection that offers digital books and digital audiobooks. So e-audios, digital audiobooks, they're all the same, and they're downloadable, but not on CD.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, is that all we have for communications then? Cool. Moving on, no unfinished business. Now we're getting to the new business. This is really the mover and shaker right here. So we have both the 2020 budget and the 2021 budget projection on there because there's some thoughts that we have to have about the 2020 budget, considering that the both the county and the city are talking about potentially some pretty significant shortfalls for tax revenue for this year. So Amanda, I know you've been a little bit closer to the grind on that one. Do you have anything in particular that you'd like to say about where we're at for 2020, and then also then we can bridge into 2021?
Yeah. Obviously, we haven't had an assistant director from January through May, so that will look like a considerable savings or an amount unspent thus far. And in 2020, we expected that we would get about $15,000 worth of revenue from fines, photocopies, contributions, and things like this. And that number is considerably lower. And I used the current data for the first third of 2020 to try to project out into 21 what we might be seeing closer to for revenue. But I'll talk to you about that in a minute if you had any other questions about 2020.
No, I think that we can jump into the budget projection, and in the packet for this month, kudos to Amanda for giving us all the information in the format that we requested last year. So the 2021s are the farthest to the left, and then we've got our 2020s, and they go backwards from there. And there's 2 scenarios for 2021. So so go for it, Amanda. Let us know what you got for us.
So again, this is my first year doing budgeting, and I just thought that the best place to start would be, especially in a year where we know we're already having tough conversations about budgeting. I just took the 2020 budget for all of our operations and moved it to 2021. And then the change that you'll see is the 3% salary increases. You'll probably notice that some of the money stayed very similar or actually dropped. For example, salary full-time, 3%, even with a 3% increase, it looks like it drops, and that's because of the turnover. So when you bring in a new assistant director, they're going to start at the beginning wage, the beginning approved wage by the union for that job class. And so this would look like, essentially, it would look like a 3.24% increase, except that if I draw your eyes down to line 42, that revenue section, I really don't think we're going to get anywhere near the $15,000, and so I'm just projecting 6,000 based on what we've seen so far this year. And how fair that is, I'm not sure, because if we remain closed and people aren't coming in and they're not using the photocopier and they're not paying for fines, I don't know what that looks like down the road. But I'm just giving you my best guess.
I think that makes sense to be conservative there.
Now, the next thing that I did, was I just wanted to provide a sample of what it would look like to get below 5%, because I know that we typically aim for that. And some of the things that I thought to look at were the travel expenses, because I don't know what traveling was going to be like in 2021 post-pandemic. I know a lot of services are now being offered virtually, and I'd like to think about that as we project our budget for next year. I also wanted to add a line called Other Physical Items for Toys and Games Collection. I'm not sure which line Steve has been paying that out of, but I want to make sure that the collection is maintained. So it's something we already have and we're already doing. I'm just calling attention to it by giving it its own line.
Good.
And then typically it looks like we have a history of adding and subtracting the amount of money for cleaning our rugs. But one of the things that is happening with COVID-19 is a lot of times a business that has an exposure incident will be required to clean up. So I don't know if we want that really to change. And now I just want to say, to summarize my little projection of under 5%, this is not really the best way to go about budgeting. I'd love to hear more about library service levels that the board would like to project, or what our goals and priorities are, and that maybe should guide our conversation about where to make strategic cuts or additions in the budget. Yeah?
Yeah. And I don't know if that's a place where we're prepared to have that conversation now. I mean, I wouldn't mind having a part of that conversation now, but as per our last meeting, we had discussed having those conversations in the finance committee and then bringing that larger conversation to the board for consideration. So,
Great.
so I think
what would be the items? What would be the line items that, if you're looking at our budget each year, a great deal of it is directed by the city's requirements and their estimations, and that has a lot to do with salary, which is, of course, the biggest expense for any of the departments. Well, maybe that's not true. I can't really speak for some of those with giant equipment. But which particular lines would you say that we should be considering or thinking about that might have some variance? I look at this budget each year with that in question in mind.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that's a good question to ask. Typically, when we've looked at places we can cut, we've looked at cutting from the books and periodicals line. In the past, we've gone as low as, I believe, 10 grand from that, and then, or, you know, requesting 10 grand from that, and then taking the money to get it back up to roughly the $25,000 mark, taking that from our 215 or something like that. That's a big one that we've
Well, that's
taken.
where, that's for cutting, but I thought it was the recommendations for what I mean, should we be going more in online type of, should we be putting an investment greater there? And maybe it does come from 215, but what, and we do have books and periodicals. I mean, that we do have ebooks and online periodicals. But my question is there, we certainly aren't going to be picking the books. I mean, that we have a lot of people with experience and resources for making what would be, it's a selection of books. But is there any sense of direction after having the COVID situation where we are going virtual for so many things? Is there any way to up that to make it in our budget decisions?
So Helen, help me make sure I'm hearing you right. So you're talking about potentially investing more into the more virtual electronic resources.
It's a question. It is a question for that. And my thinking here is we can always cut things that are not required for keeping the building open, paying the expenses. We can cut those, anything that we can cut advertisement, but we can't cut building maintenance. I mean, these are things that have to do with the physical or with the salaries. Those are not our purview at all. So the things that we might make any difference with would be sub to the category in my mind, and it doesn't really take it doesn't take any cutting or adding at that particular level. It would probably come from board discussions about what we want to emphasize in the library, or Amanda's suggestion what we might emphasize. Of course, I'm of the opinion that we need to always have a sync fund for the equipment, and maybe we're going to have to expand equipment. We just did the computers, but maybe just the one computer that Amanda got, maybe we're going to have to do, something more with that sort of thing. But I certainly am not the one that knows the answer to it, but I do have questions about it.
Mm-hmm. I think that, I'll make a note of that, and then when the finance committee gets together, we'll take that up as one of the things to consider.
So whenever you are cutting it or rearranging the budget and you can usually tweak it up to $15,000. It seems like almost in a year, or it has been in the past. So I don't know what $15,000 is going to do for the city or the county. That would be like $750 for each of them. But the idea of when you bring the budget back, you will pull these things out for us, because the estimates, the things that the city requires to run the library physically, that part.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay.
Well, thanks for taking the time to explain that. I've been having a hard time sometimes with some of these meetings when I can't really lock onto somebody from being there in person. So it's nice to have, I sometimes need a little bit more clarification. So those of you on the finance, oh yeah, there you go. Those of you on the finance committee, plan on a meeting this month. We'll get together and we'll share screens and talk about numbers and all that sort of stuff. And then, so we'll hopefully bring that back to the next meeting with some concepts on that. And other than that, I don't think that we have I don't think we have any other business. Is there anything else that that we need to consider?
One question came to my mind that I don't know if I have to put on an agenda or not, but where are we on the replacement board members from the city and the county? Is that being pursued? Are we just ourselves for now?
The county's advertised it, but I haven't heard anything beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
The city has advertised it, and we had one person who had applied this previous the previous time we had opened up for applications, but we haven't heard back as to whether or not they're still interested in.
Okay, thank you.
Should we be asking around as board members?
If you want to.
Yes, please.
if we're in contact with anyone that might. Oh. Okay.
Okay, good question.
Just one thing to plug in numbers, and just one thing to point out that as far as the budget is concerned, labor or our workforce is 41% of the budget, or is that right? Where do my numbers go here?
That sounds about right, Dave. Yeah. I think it's always been about 40% of the overall budget.
Okay. Or maybe I have that backwards here. This is labor negative remainder. I'm sorry, it's 60%.
Sounds right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that sounds right to me.
Maybe that is the way it's been.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's just opposite of what I was thinking. But regardless, there is significant costs on either side of that. And so anywhere we can kind of pinch and squeeze if we need to. Jay, is that 3% increase really projected by the city? Do you know?
Which one are you talking about for the personnel costs?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still pretty early in the game, but we signed a contract with our health insurance provider for a 3-year contract on that, so that we can predict the health insurance increases for that time, and we signed a union contract for 3%. So we feel pretty confident that the numbers are predictable for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. The county, we're negotiating with unions this year.
Okay.
And so it just surprised me to see that. But if you had already signed contracts that carry over into this year, then that makes sense. So.
Yep, that's the plan. So cool. Is there anything else that we need to discuss for that? If not, then this is really good because my computer's at 1% battery, so I got to go plug it in.
Okay.
All right, we are adjourned. 6:30.
Good to see you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks, Amanda.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye now.